All right, let's get started, Greg. So excited to have everybody join us today. We have 41 Orange and Sales Intel, and we're presenting on using ABM and Outbound to drive inbound leads. So really excited to have everybody here with us today. Greg, you want to go on to the next one? Cool. All right, so we have with us Greg. Greg Anderson is co-founder and CEO of 41 Orange. He's a veteran and 3 times entrepreneur. He's scaled 41 Orange 130% for 3 years running, raised private equity for 41 Orange. He's a member of Entrepreneurs Org and mentors student entrepreneurs at SDSU. My name is Jason Hubbard. I'm Vice President of Growth at Sales Intel. I've helped grow 3 of Inc.'s top 100 fastest growing private companies, and excited to be working with and representing Sales Intel, where we have the most extensive and highest quality list and database of contacts to help companies grow and target their ideal prospects. So we'll get into both how 41 Orange can help on the execution, as well as Sales Intel can help on the data front around how to execute this whole strategy. So Greg, why don't you say a little bit about who and what 41 Orange is?
Sure. So 41 Orange is a marketing technology solutions provider. We're one of the top 10 HubSpot partners nationwide. That's at about 6,000 HubSpot partner agencies. And we really specialize in 3 primary areas. The first area is business-to-business demand generation. The second area is content marketing. We produce about 150 articles a month across 12 verticals. And then we also offer sales enablement services. And we partner with Sales Intel for data procurement, enrichment, and integration services. We're based out of San Diego, California, and have a team of about 15 employees.
Great. All right. I'll do a quick intro on Sales Intel. So like I was saying, Sales Intel prides ourselves on having the best B2B data out there. So anytime you're trying to execute a sales marketing strategy, having access to the quality data that you need to be able to get in front of the people that you need to market and sell to is always crucial. We built that out of 7 years of data research experience. So we're one of the experts in the industry, and have really kind of been at the forefront of this from really the start of the segment that we're part of. We specialize in human verified data. So we're a big believer that you have to use machine processing, AI, all of that stuff to be able to do anything at scale, but that's only going to get you so far, typically only to about 70% accuracy. And we pride ourselves on having 95+% accuracy. And the secret to that is having actual human researchers go through and hand verify all of that data. And then all of that data gets you the actionable intelligence that you need to be able to power your sales and marketing teams. And we present that to you in a accessible format, both for our web portal as well as through our integrations with primary platforms like HubSpot, Salesforce, Outreach. And we'll get into a lot of those platforms as well later on.
Cool. So overall, the way that we kind of look at the world is there's 3 stages of a growth strategy. This is kind of marketing 101, but it's important to cover. The first stage is awareness. So people need to know that you exist. The second stage is evaluation. Your prospects need to know what you can do for them. I call it the WIFM, the what's in it for me. And then purchase. And that's why should I work with you over somebody else, or as opposed to an alternative like doing nothing. And there's really great strategies and tactics that work for each one of those phases. And this is a representation of what the inbound marketing model looks like, right? It's using content from each one of these stages in the growth strategy to be able to generate new leads and then pull them through the funnel. For example, if you're looking to generate awareness, writing blog content, being able to drive search traffic, and then you don't want them just reading your blogs, you want them attending your webinars, coming to your workshops, reading your pillar content, reading your case studies. And then obviously if you have a really engaged lead that you've run through a map, a marketing automation platform, then you'll be able to determine that they're sales ready through lead scoring or other alternatives. hand them off to your sales team and get them ready for whatever the next step is, whether it's an audit, a free trial, a consultation, whatever is going to get them kind of across the finish line. So that's our growth strategy in terms of how we execute on that growth process is, and it's the topic of this webinar, is we started out as an inbound marketing agency back in, I think it was 2010. And inbound marketing, that term was kind of coined by HubSpot back in 2006. So by the time that we got into inbound marketing, that process of generating really good content, publishing it online, and driving prospective clients was about 4 years old. And if you look at today, it's 2019, so you can very easily do the math and say, wow, the inbound marketing as a strategy is like actually pretty old. And especially considering what the internet and how quickly that things change, we could be doing ABM today, and 2 or 3 years from now, ABM isn't relevant, and there's this whole nother type of really cool strategy and tactic to kind of capitalize on. So what we thought to ourselves was, all right, we're working with all these clients, we're doing these really awesome inbound marketing programs, we're driving tons of traffic, driving tons of lead, but geez, does it take forever? If we're working with a client that's, let's say, like a brand new startup, maybe they just got their Series A, and they want to drive a bunch of traffic for a specific category. Maybe they're like a really cool CRM or sales enablement platform company. That process of actually being able to drive rankings is going to take 9, 12, 18 months, possibly 2 years or more, just because of how competitive the search world is. So while inbound marketing, the concept of it still works, of creating value and being able to nurture and pull prospects to the funnel, the big challenge is, well, how do I get it to work quickly? And one kind of immediate thought might be, well, we should run paid advertising. And that's great if you're taking a content piece and you're syndicating it through, let's say, LinkedIn ads or some type of other ad platform. But the issue is that you don't have control over who's seeing those ads, no matter how targeted they are. So we thought, instead of running advertising, which can be really expensive, especially if it's on LinkedIn, and getting contacts that aren't necessarily a fit for our ideal client profile, why don't we take an outbound approach? If you think about what a sales team does, they typically will build a list, and they'll say, okay, these are a list of our 300, it's a named account list or ideal client that's based on our ideal client profile, and they'll hand those lists to the reps, and those reps will follow a specific sequence to do outreach to them. So we thought, why don't we put an outbound engine on top of an inbound marketing program? And so the concept is, let's take all that great content, and instead of sitting on our hands waiting for the gods of Google to start giving us search rankings, let's actually push that content out through LinkedIn and through email. So we'll talk more about that. And then obviously part of inbound marketing is automation, running nurturing workflows to pull those leads to the funnel. And then the final piece is sales enablement, making sure that the sales team has everything they could need to possibly basically supporting the sales process to get those leads over the finish line.
And Greg, you talked a little bit about some of the motivating factors for wanting to adopt this kind of strategy, in particular being able to accelerate traction and growth. You and I have been in this for a little while. What are some of the trends that you've seen that are really sort of reshaping the landscape and the strategy here over the last few years?
Yeah, well, I think for one thing, everyone's kind of getting burned out in content. I think there's so much content and it's so competitive that you almost need some type of edge like this to get your content out there. That's definitely one thing I'm seeing. On the client side of working with our clients, the patience isn't there anymore, right? It's like, no, I played that game with SEO. I worked with an SEO agency for 6 or 9 months, and I didn't see anything, and I'm done investing into that. And there is long-term strategic value in SEO. Not only can it add, EBITDA multiples upon an exit to a company, but also if you do it right and you're getting, 500 leads a month, you've got your revenue machine built in for you. All you need is an inside sales team and some AEs to work those inbound leads, as long as those inbound leads are, mostly fitting your ideal client profile. So there's a tremendous amount of value in SEO, in content marketing, but just the time it takes to actually do that is just, it's really frustrating, especially for companies that want to move fast, or companies that have limited resources and they can't, spend 150 grand on SEO over 9 months, waiting, twiddling their thumbs, waiting for leads to come in.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note, here early on in this discussion, these are not mutually exclusive strategies. In fact,
Yes.
they are very much complementary. The content that you're creating for an SEO strategy
Yes.
Does double duty and is extremely effective on the outbound side. So yeah, this isn't saying one versus another.
Exactly.
Both of these should be run in parallel with each other.
Yes.
One gives you an immediate goose versus the other is more of a long-term strategy.
Exactly. Yeah. I look at this as adding an outbound component to your inbound is like putting a supercharger on an engine.
Yep. Cool. I didn't want to interrupt your flow, but
yeah. So this is just the general kind of demand generation process. And I'm going to go pretty briefly through this because we're going to talk about each step. But like a sales team would do in an outbound process, they would identify a named account list or ABM list. They would obviously pull the job titles that they want for the personas they target. And then what we do with that list is we do direct outreach through LinkedIn and through cold email. And I'm going to show you what that process looks like. The big difference is what a sales team is doing is they're asking to set appointments. They're like, hey, we're this technology company. We do mobile apps. We do HTML, CSS, JavaScript, blah, 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 blah. And some more information that you don't care about. And then they send you this link like, here's this link that you can use to book me for an appointment. Well, if you think about where that sits in the funnel, they're trying to do awareness, evaluation, and purchase all in one small message that they're sending you through LinkedIn. And that's just impossible. You can't get somebody to know, like, and trust you, to know that you exist, to evaluate you, and to make a prospective purchasing decision based on one LinkedIn message or one cold email. So while you might get a 2% reply rate and get some appointments about it, or from those activities, it's not terribly effective. And so what we're doing, instead of sending out, hey, let's set up an appointment to talk and doing that kind of lead generation tactic, we're saying, hey, we've got this really cool content for you that we wrote specifically for you that we think is going to be valuable, or we have this event or an experience that we think is going to be particularly valuable for you, and we'd like you to attend that event. And then ultimately it gets nurtured through workflows and then handed off to the sales team. So we're going to talk more about what that outreach looks like and what types of events and experiences we do, what type of content pieces you would use this for. And then the next step, Jason's going to talk through kind of the ABM side of how to pull the list.
Cool. So yeah, I mean, the challenge with any type of strategy like this is, there's twofold or two pieces to it. One is, the general outbound strategy of, how do you use the content, how to use the messaging, what channels do you use, what cadence, all of the technical actual execution side of it. But the other key to that is you have to have a list of people that you're doing, the outbound outreach to. By definition, an outbound campaign requires you to have people that you're reaching out to, and that requires you to be able to have contact information, in particular phone numbers, ideally direct dial phone numbers, as well as email addresses as the two primary mechanisms. Although a lot of people are starting to do direct mail stuff again, which had completely fallen off the radar for a really long time. But a lot of these channels have started to get clogged as we've adopted more and more marketing automation and sales enablement and stuff like that allows people to do things at a much heavier scale than they used to. So people are having to sort of go back to the drawing board a little bit, and so those actual physical addresses are becoming important again as well. So a big piece of that is you have to start off identifying what your accounts are. So what are the companies you want to go after? So Greg mentioned ICP. ICP stands for Ideal Client or Customer Profile. And so, whenever we talk about a named account, this is what you're trying to get to. And this can be spread across multiple different criteria. It can be things like technographic information. So these would be the technologies, the platforms that they're employing. So, one of my previous companies was a company called Cirrus Insight. We made apps that integrated Salesforce with the inbox. For a long time, we just integrated Salesforce with Gmail. And so we were extremely specific on the technographic side as far as what our ICP was. We needed people that were using Salesforce and Gmail. If you weren't on both of those, then we had no reason to talk to you. And if you were on both of those, then you actually fit our ICP, and it was really that simple. So, you've got technographic, you've got firmographic information. So this is stuff like company size, annual revenue, number of employees, employee distribution across different departments or roles, where a company's located, all the way down to, industries, verticals, and even there's increasing numbers of platforms, including Sales Intel, where you can actually start getting into and seeing buying intent. And so what buying intent is where we can actually, through different providers and tracking of cookies and stuff like that, actually look at the sites and the searches that different companies are doing. So if they're looking for a specific platform, so we can go back to Cirrus Insight, buying intent on somebody who was evaluating Salesforce would have been extremely valuable for us. This wasn't widely available at the time that I was over there, but the ability to be able to identify and get in front of those people that were evaluating Salesforce and be able to present our solution at that time would have been a huge advantage for us. So identifying what that ICP is across whatever your criteria on, and obviously this is going to vary from one company to another, one product to another, but it's really important to sit down and work through this exercise of figuring out what your ideal customers are. And you can do this through a variety of things. You can do it through customer surveys. You can do it, through your own database, looking at, what are similarities across your different companies, your different products, your different opportunities that you've closed, and see where you've really had that product market fit. And then in a lot of cases, like I talked about, it may be blaringly obvious what your ICP is. We've got a very well-defined niche that we go after, and so we know what our ICP is. But regardless on where you fall within that, you want to be able to define that, and then you want to be able to find a provider that allows you to be able to run searches and queries across all of those different filters that you've used to identify what your ICP is. Because obviously, identifying and figuring out what your ICP is half the equation. From there, you've got to actually find something that you can input that into to be able to refine and identify those targeted companies. So the second part is, so we've identified the companies, the accounts that we want to go after. The second step is, who do we want to go after at those companies? Who are your actual buyers? Who are the people that you need to have at the table in order to be able to close the deal? And nowadays, most up-to-date research is going to tell you somewhere between a half dozen and a dozen people need to be at the table these days to make and execute a buying decision. That's quite a few decision makers that you've got to be able to track down and corral and get in front of. And so being able to identify what all of those decision makers are, and in particular who your primary decision makers are and the roles they're going to have within that conversation and being able to work that deal are crucial. And what you'll find oftentimes is you're going to have several roles that have to get buy-in. But in particular, you're going to have one or two people that are crucial to have, as part of that conversation, that are going to be your primary cheerleaders. And so these are people that oftentimes are going to be either the end user or managers of the end user of your product you're offering. And these are going to be the people that are really pushing for it. They're the ones that have the need or feel the pain. And they're the ones that you really absolutely have to have at the table to be able to get the conversation even going. You may eventually need to have, the CFO or the CEO or legal or, the CTO for sign off on it in order to get the deal across the finish line. But if you don't have those decision makers, if you don't have those cheerleaders identified and part of that conversation early on, then that deal and that conversation is not going to go anywhere. So again, step one is identify your ICP, your accounts and the companies you want to go after. Step two is identify who those personas are that you want to sell to. And this is going to get really important on both fronts as we start getting into the content piece of the strategy, because as you develop that content, you want to have content that's going to be aimed at those specifics, both the companies, the accounts, the verticals, the industries, as well as the actual buying personas within the company. And so this will help to inform your content strategy as you're building that out, as well as the messaging that you're doing in your outbound outreach.
Yeah, so bringing us to outreach, if we're able to find those contacts, 166 verified contacts, and we were targeting, let's say, manufacturing companies that do between 50 and 300 million in revenue, so middle market, and companies that are specifically in California. So I was able to find Andrew Thompson through the Sales Intel platform. And once we've found their contact information, now it's time for us to do the outreach. So this is what a really basic outreach sequence might look like, where we would send a LinkedIn connection request. This is not an email, it's a connection request. Once they accept that connection request, then we can send them a welcome message. If you have your sales team doing some outbound activities to help you promote the content, you can put phone calls within this sequence. And then obviously we're going to be able to send them emails too. So just like your sales team is using a specific outbound cadence of touch points, we're going to use that same type of outbound methodology. But again, instead of pushing for a meeting, we're going to say something like this. So we're going to go to Andrew's profile. We're going to say, hit the connection request button, customize our invitation. And we're going to say, hey, Andrew, on August 20th, we're hosting a dinner for in Redwood. That's where he's from, for middle market manufacturing CEOs. Based on your profile, our selection committee agreed that you'd be a good fit for the group. May I send you more information? And this is coming from Daniel, someone who wants to get in front of this gentleman as a prospect. So you notice how we're not saying, hi, Andrew, we're this technology company that serves middle market manufacturing companies in California, and this is how great we are, and this is all the cool stuff we do, and here are 3 case studies, and here's this link that you can use to book me. In fact, we said nothing about our company. We said nothing about who we are. We said nothing about our value proposition. All we're simply doing is we're asking Andrew if based on we're telling him that we have this piece of content for him, or we have this specific event or experience that we're putting on it specifically for people like him. And based on the selection committee that we have to invite people to this event, they thought they'd be a good fit. And can we send him more information? So we're not giving Andrew the link and saying, here, go ahead and register for this. It's permission-based. May I send you more information? And if they respond and say, yes, I'm interested, then it shows that type of intent that, hey, look, your content piece or your event or experience that you're hosting is attractive to the persona that you're targeting. So again, if Andrew doesn't respond to those LinkedIn messages, maybe he's just not on LinkedIn, or he uses a personal email address with LinkedIn and doesn't check his personal email, then we're also going to send Andrew emails. And this is not being sent from 41 Orange. This is being sent from our client. So we actually log into our client's LinkedIn profile and we send messages on their behalf. We create an email address for them. Usually it's like a .net, and that way we're not using their primary domain for cold email, which can get you into hot water. Using that .net to be able to send out cold email with the same type of messaging. So some cool things to note before I move on. You can send, I think it's like 40 in-mails per month if you're on a Sales Navigator or if you're on the premium version of LinkedIn. But little known fact, you can send up to 6,000 connection requests per month with any LinkedIn subscription, even if you're not paying them on the free version. So if you have a list of LinkedIn profiles that you've been able to pull from a database provider like Sales Intel, you can send up to 6,000 messages, connection requests per month per profile. So if you can imagine, if you're running 3 profiles, that's a lot of outbound. That's a ton of outbound. And if you have a good response rate and a good connection rate, then you're really going to see some great traction from that. So let's say Andrew responds and he says, yes, please send me more information. Then what you would normally do for any content piece or an event, you're going to send them to a landing page where they can fill out a specific form to register to attend the event, or they can fill out a form to get the content piece. Or if you're using like a chatbot tool, then you could take that, you could have them talk with the chatbot, kind of whatever you're doing on your site to drive that engagement once somebody's interested in what you have to offer. So obviously once they fill out that form, that's going to push that contact information into your CRM. For us, we do one of the strategies or one of our campaigns that we do every quarter is a mastermind group for senior sales professionals here in San Diego. And so this is Jeff Rosmus, who signed up for a mastermind group. He filled out the form. Now he's in our CRM, and we've got this field called event preferences, and that way it can track what types of events and experiences or what types of content Jeff is most interested in. And that way, when we come out with other content that fits this persona, we know that we can retarget Jeff and we can continue to nurture him through the funnel. So the fourth piece is they've requested the content piece, or they've registered for the event. So it's being able to deliver on those experiences or to deliver on that content. Run nurturing sequences, right? So it's just because somebody comes to your event, that does not necessarily mean that they're sales ready. Let's say you've got like a small intimate event of, let's use the senior sales roundtable, for example, and you have 12 to 14 attendees. While you're in that roundtable experience, you can usually identify 2 to 3 prospects that actually have a need at the time based on the challenges that they're talking about. And then the other prospects that aren't sales ready, they're going to be put into nurturing sequences, sending them additional content that we think is relevant to them, and also inviting them to the next roundtable experience. And over time, what you're doing is you're building that relationship, you're building trust, and ultimately that's going to lead into them becoming a customer at some point. And then the final piece of it is to hand it off to sales. So again, if it's a prospect who attended a live event and you had your sales team there and they have the ability to talk to them, you can go down the list and you could say, okay, I'm going to reach out to these 10 people. The rest of them you can put into nurturing sequences. You could do it based on lead scoring if you're doing a lot of events per year, and it can be based on how many content pieces they touched, if they visited a pricing page. I mean, a lot of this stuff can be done through lead routing tools or marketing automation software. So turn it back to Jason.
Yeah. So we've got a couple of case studies to talk through here really quick. One of them being 41 Orange. So as Greg said, they are actually not only a partner, but a customer and end user of Sales Intel, and have been using our data to help drive their strategies and efforts here for a while. And so, really excited that we just finished this case study with Greg. And so excited to be able to share with you guys live the results of this. So on average, 41 Orange is saving 8 hours a campaign. So that's 40 to 60 hours a month that they're saving on their campaigns. And that's by streamlining the process of gathering all of this information. So the stuff I talked through as the first couple of steps, identifying your ICP, your targeted accounts, as well as your personas, and then gathering the information that you need to be able to go after those. And for most people without a solution like Sales Intel, that's a very time consuming process. And of course, time equals money in this scenario. So being able to go into a platform, enter in those search criteria that you need to be able to pull the information on the customers and the personas at those companies that you need to target, helps to streamline that process immensely.
Yeah, and I'll throw in a couple comments. So, one of the biggest issues that we were having was we were using tools that would pull down data from Sales Navigator. So you would go into Sales Navigator, you would build your list, and then we had a tool called Get Prospect that would pull down all that contact information. One, when you're using any type of browser extension that is doing something automated in LinkedIn, there's a pretty good chance that your profile is going to get flagged and it's going to get shut down. And then you're going to have to upload your license to prove that it's really you. And so that was one issue, getting data directly from LinkedIn. The other issue getting data directly from LinkedIn was we were getting a lot of personal email addresses, which is fine. Like if you're doing something like a sales roundtable, you can send that to a Gmail address. But if you're trying to send a content piece, it really should be sent to their work email. And the issue was, of course, too, that not everyone has their phone number on LinkedIn. Not everyone has a working email address on LinkedIn. So we were getting, which is really strange, a really high bounce rate from the data that we were pulling down. And if you've ever used LinkedIn Sales Navigator, you'll know that they just don't have a great search functionality. Like if you were looking up CEOs of companies that do $50 million in revenue, you might actually, Sales Navigator would pull up, let's say like a marketing director who's working at that company, but also has a side gig as a CEO for their side hustle. And LinkedIn couldn't tell the difference between those if they were actually the CEO of that company or if they were a CEO somewhere else. So we before this, we had to manually go through, let's say we're loading up 1,000 contacts into a campaign. We had to manually go through each contact to see, is this the actual CEO of that company? Or do they have some sort of side hustle that's confusing the LinkedIn Sales Navigator search platform? So having it this way, just to be able to say, look, these are our parameters. We plug that into Sales Intel, or we work their support team, and to be able to get that data pretty quickly is tremendously valuable for us.
Yeah, it's interesting that you go through that process and the struggles with their native search, because so much what you talked about having to do yourself is what our research team does in their manual hand processing of the records, because we run into the very same thing whenever it comes to our machine processing and algorithm of our own data, which is trying to separate the signal versus the noise. So, we have so many inputs from so many data sources and trying to figure out, which one is the right Greg Anderson? Is he, is it some side hustle, or is he CEO and co-founder of 41 Orange? And so that's where it's crucial for us to have that research team that actually goes through and hand processes every one of those records.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah. So I just want to talk about, what we've been able to do here at 41 Orange with this exact strategy. This was a TED Talk event that we did. And I'm sure all of you are familiar with TED Talks. It's 17 minutes on a certain topic, and then maybe there's a small Q&A afterwards. This one was hosted with Chase Bank and ADP. And we had 72, we hosted this at a brewery, so that's why we called it TED Talks on Tap. And we had 72 attendees to that one, about 81 registrations, 72 attendees. So really good response rate. That was all from doing cold outreach on LinkedIn and doing cold outreach via email. We have an event coming up with HubSpot on August 20th here in San Diego. We're calling it our Wine, Dine, and Learn. For that event, we already have 67 registrations. It's been 3 weeks since we launched that campaign, so some of these can work pretty quickly. We did an economic forum in April with a regional bank. That one we had 305 registrations and 265 attendees. 48% of the attendees at that event were CEOs of companies that do between 10 and 100 million in revenue. So you can just be super, super targeted. And it's not necessarily about the event size of how many people you get there. The smaller events are really good too, like the sales mastermind, the marketing mastermind, the happy hour that you want to put on. And that gives you the opportunity to really build a personal relationship with your prospects versus maybe having small talk conversation at one of these larger events. So that's kind of what we had to present to you today about this outbound-led, inbound, kind of account-based methodology of being able to take data and then send out information to those prospects on either content that you have available to them or you've created for them, or driving them to events and experiences, pulling them through the funnel using marketing automation like Marketo or HubSpot or another one of those marketing automation platforms, and then ultimately handing those leads over to the sales team to turn into closed-won deals. Great.
We've run a few minutes over our allotted time, but if anybody has any questions for us and want to pop it in the Q&A section, we'll get to those. Greg, we have one in here. From which tool do you use first outreach? So they're asking, do you prefer HubSpot, Outreach? What platform do you prefer to use for that initial outreach?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so here's the thing. HubSpot charges you by the number of contacts that you have in the CRM, especially if you're using the marketing professional. So you don't want to load a bunch of cold contacts into HubSpot because you're paying an extra $50 a month for each 1,000 contact records. And HubSpot's not really built for cold outreach. It's got a really amazing sequencing tool that you can use if you have Sales Pro or Sales Starter. But it's not purpose built for outbound, and they prefer you not to send cold email. So we're an Outreach.io partner. You can use Outreach.io. You could use Reply.io. There's Mailshake. There's a bunch of a whole slew of kind of cold email platforms that are specifically designed to send out those types of emails. The reason why we like Outreach.io is it's just a best in class tool. It's one of the more expensive ones, but I think it's far and above SalesLoft or any of the other tools out there.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. That's what we're using to power our BDR team as well. Cool. Any other questions that anybody has for us before we hop off here? Like I said, we ran over a little bit, so don't want to hold people longer than we need to, but happy to stay on to answer anything that anybody has. All right. Well, Greg, looks like that's all they have. Thank you so much for joining us today. That was great. And like I said, we'll send out a follow-up afterwards with the link to the deck as well as the recording. And thanks everybody for joining us.
Yeah, if there's any other questions that you have about platforms that we use or conversion rates or anything like that, more than happy to discuss that with you offline.
Cool. And Greg, we got one more that just came in right before the buzzer. Sure. They're asking which is better, running batch campaigns or running a sequence campaign?
Sequences 100% of the time. Sending out batch campaigns, it's difficult to really make those personalized. Like if you're sending out 1,000 emails in one blast, that could also get you caught in a spam filter as well. Yep. If you're sending it through a newsletter tool like a MailChimp, or if you're sending it through HubSpot, it looks like an automated email. It looks like an email that was sent from a platform, and that's instantly going to get somebody to look at it and say, this is not an email that somebody sat down and actually wrote for me. The other issue of sending batch campaigns, let's say if you're doing it through HubSpot, is because it has that HTML programming and looks like a newsletter format. If you're sending it to Gmail addresses, you're going to get caught in the promotions tab. So I always recommend doing sequences, and most of the conversion does not come from that first initial outreach. Most of the conversion is going to come from the second, the third, or the fourth outreach of reminding them that they have this invitation.
Yep. Yeah, and the other thing to keep in mind that's really important in that is, and this gets a little technical, but it's the difference between a tool like Outreach, which has a direct integration with your inbox. So it's actually sending an email from your inbox as if you sent it manually yourself, versus a tool like HubSpot is going in through the DNS and doing it server side. So it makes it really easy for Google and the other gatekeepers to be able to identify that as a server sent email as opposed to an inbox sent email.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Let's see. For sales intel, what pricing do we charge? So pricing is going to depend on the size of your database, what your ICP is, and then in particular number of users that you have internal that are going to be using it, as well as what integrations you want to use. Right now on the integration front, all of that's thrown in. So your subscription gives you access to the whole platform as well as the integrations, but it's going to be a sliding scale based off of your needs as well as the size of your team. And then happy to dig into that and get some more detail around what exactly your needs are and stuff like that. Asking if we work on credit. So no, this is we're a SaaS application. So it's a subscription model, which gives you access to the database. But the key to that, and one of the big reasons why we do that, is your data decays at a rate of over 30% a year. And so, if you go and pull your data and then you don't go and keep that up to date, then you're going to start running into big issues as far as deliverability and the accuracy of your data. Versus if you have access to the platform, then you can go and pull as needed for your specific campaigns. Instead of going and pulling based off of credits and then having that data decay on you. Cool. Any other questions for us before we hop off? All right. Well, thanks again, Greg. And when we send out the email, feel free to just reply to that. And if you have any additional questions for us, and we can route you based off of that.
Great.
Thanks, everybody.
See ya.